Hey guys, welcome to another session of Reading Between the Lines. So for this update, we got a couple new things. I think it's kind of surprising to me what's exciting me in this patch note. First things first, we'll just get through this. So episode 2, chapter 5-1. I can't believe how far we've come already. I'm still on, in story, I'm still grinding 1S. So I completed chapter 1 and 2. I still have 1S. 2S, and then 3 and 4. We got a new armor here. I don't see a preview, but if it's like the previous stuff, it's actually pretty good. If it rolls well your way, I think even end game players still use these gear because they're epic quality. 71 though, so ideally you want 85s or higher. This is what I was spending so much time on before I did the video recording. 5 new 3-star heroes, and they seem to be really good. Gets me quite excited, but at the same time, it makes me think about all the 3-star heroes that I kind of like taken for granted, and just thought because they're a 3-star hero, I would never build them. But their kits are all actually pretty good. But let's just go through this really quickly. So Warrior, Libra, Earth type. It's a 3-star, so lower base stats, but this is comparable to like Luna and Lilibet. So if you guys are familiar with their stats, pretty decent attack, pretty good HP, and good defense. These are like bruiser type warriors, a lot more bruisery. You could build them a lot more bruisery, but they still have a lot of attack to scale from. So it's pretty good. I think it's like 1,100 if I'm not mistaken. One second, I'm just gonna pull this up really quick. Just Luna, I think it's like 1,100 on a 6-star base. Yeah, 1,119 6-star base, 6,200, and then HP, and then a 620 defense. But this is a 3-star. It's 6% more base stats if you're a 5-star base. The 3-stars are lacking at 6%, so you just do your calculation backwards. But regardless, it's still pretty good. If you notice the kit here, S1, 50% chance to use Satisfying Strike, and it's a separate skill that's not based on his S2 or S3. It's an additional one, but the attack will always result in a critical hit. I think how this works is it won't stack with your critical hit rate. So if you have 50% critical hit chance, and you have a 50% chance to do this, it doesn't stack that way. It's a 50% chance to do it regardless. So regardless of your hit rate, it has a 50% chance to always critical hit. Because they should be built as bruisers, because he can also counterattack in his kit. So when attacked, he has up to a 50% chance to counterattack. Now I don't know why they decided not to show the Mola skill enhancement and also the soul burn effect. So for example, I'm just gonna swap really quickly on the screen here to says. So you could see a lot more detail here. I don't know why they didn't include it for the 3-star, but it would be interesting. But regardless, we'll know it once this is updated into our game. But the awakening portion or the S3 has 85% up to 100%. So we know that at least there are probably 1 or 2 Mola enhancements for the proc rate. Chance to stun for 2 turns. 2 turn stun. That's very good, but it's a single target. But 100% chance to do it. So for him, I think, usable for 3-star is definitely fun to have. I like this Lena a bit better. S1, attacks with a strong fist, increase the combat readiness of the caster by 20%. And then for this one, for the S2, it increases the critical hit chance by up to 50%. This one should stack with your main stat. So again, she's an ice warrior and also Libra. So again, we're talking Luna, Lilibet stats. So what we read up here for this guy, what's his name? Ainz maybe. So pretty decent, but for her, I think it's gonna be pretty awesome because if this is a passive that gives you a 50% critical hit chance, regardless of any situation, then this should stack with her main stat. So you could run her, you could run her at a 50% crit rate with really high crit damage, and she should be a pretty decent damage dealer. As you could use a crit damage necklace, you could use a destruction set. Just I'm talking like really easy basic builds, but again, it does depend on how you want to use them. So you could run speed set, but having a 50% critical hit chance on the S2 is awesome. Makes a lot of flexibility when you're looking for stats, and I don't think she's that stat hungry either, so it's pretty cool. She might need some effectiveness for her S3 here. Attacks all enemies, so AoE. CR pushback, decrease combat readiness by 20% before increasing attack for caster by 2 turns. Damage dealt proportional to the enemy's lost health. When the enemy is defeated with the skill, cooldown does not occur. So it seems that actually it's a like pretty packed hero kit in my opinion. Quite usable. I think if you built her well enough, she would still be usable in certain PvP scenarios. And when we talk about PvP, I think everybody really focuses on GVG now, in terms of like seriousness. I mean, so I think she could be usable there. But again, I guess we would need to see some damage mods. But CR pushback, CR push for herself, and a self attack buff, pretty good. We have here Hatan, Leo, and a thief. So this is the same as Vildred's star sign. So taking Blazing Souls and those wolf fangs. He's not. I'm not really that into his kit as much, but here are my thoughts. S1 up to an 80% chance to decrease hit chance for 1 turn. Damage dealt proportional to the caster's speed. If you know Vildred, he's actually pretty fast. I think it's 115 speed if I'm not mistaken. 3 stars and up to 5-star nats, they don't have a difference in the speed, but the rest of the stats are lowered. So high attack, of course, if you know Vildred pretty well. Pretty good HP as well. Vildred has like 5k HP, so that's pretty solid. For a thief, that's not bad. S2 attacks the enemy with wind pressure. Activates it again when the enemy is defeated. When an enemy is defeated, and then increase the damage proportional to his speed. So how it reads, it seems that it's automatic. It's not granting you an extra turn. So if you kill with wind pressure, he'd probably do it most likely at random RNG since it's a single target. But I mean, it's sort of nice to have. I was thinking if you're using him for sort of farming purposes, it might be okay. But I don't know how good he is. For 3-star, he's okay, but I think he's gonna be one of those 3-stars that kind of get neglected in terms of like high-end PvP. Releases energies to all allies, increasing attack for 2 turns. So he's an AoE attack buffers. That's pretty good. And then caster self speed buff for 2 turn. So kind of cool. Again, because of his speed scaling, it's good to have that for himself. So potentially he could be doing a lot of damage, but it seems to be all single target based. Again, we'll know more once the data mine comes in on the damage mods. This is cool though. Eaton is awesome. Cancer Knight. So someone on stream gave me the data that Crozet is a Cancer Knight. So I'm going to use Crozet as a base here, and Pilus. Actually, let's use Pilus because Pilus is a 3-star. So we have the exact stats here. Light elemental hero. Pilus has a 6,400 health and 700 defense. Very high defense, very high health. Especially for 3-star, this is very good. The speed is gonna lack 91 speed. But what I like about Eaton is his S2. It's a passive skill. But let's talk about the S1 first. 75% chance to provoke for 1 turn. Very decent, and the damage is proportional to his max health. So depending on the scaling, maybe you can make him a bruiser. Who knows? The S2, the passive, 30% damage reduction for all allies. So that's an Aureus, but a better one. 10% more damage taken, Aureus. And if you increase his skill enhancement, it can get up his health up to 20% more. So 20% more off the 6,400 base. That's very, very good. I think he's gonna be a really good light elemental knight. You could run him with like Adamant Shield, and he would be better than C. Armin in terms of tanking. in terms of tanking for the team. Of course, C Armin does have, I think, a better kit in terms of support wise, whereas he is more for himself other than his passive. His S3 releases strong energy, dispelling all debuffs inflicted on himself. So as long as he's not stunned or asleep or whatever, he can do this. So like if he has like a defense break on him, he does it. He can cleanse himself, increases a barrier and immunity for 2 turns. The barrier strength proportionate to his max health. So very, very good, very robust kit. I think light baits are like one of the most needed roles in the game at the moment. Since most, and don't quote me on this, don't say like, oh, Specimen Says is a really good light nuker. Most high like single target dark damage dealers are single target, and they're dark, they're not light. So he himself as a light bait might be okay, but then of course it doesn't really gel well with compared to Kikarat or F Maya. Like he won't be like tanking Assassin Kali, for example. But again, if you use C Armin to cut down, let's say like Arbiter Vildra type of damage, he would be very good to have. So this is what I'm saying. Like the 3 stars for this round are pretty hype for me. At this point, like I would definitely use him. I would build him up and I would use him. And I think for Arbiter Vildra fights, he would make it a laughing, like he would make it a joke. He would make it a joke. His barrier is self-sustainable too. It's kind of like having a little heal before your healers are getting their cooldown rotations back. Batiste, Warrior Taurus. So this is the same level as like Sigret. So I don't know a 3-star equivalent, but I'm gonna pull up Sigret's base stats for you guys. So Taurus takes the Blazing Rage and the Horn of Desire as their catalyst. 1228 attack, 5700 health, pretty high, and the defense is 550. Like that's like average, is pretty good. But speed is 109. So for Warrior, 109 speed is pretty decent. So Sigret has pretty good base stats. So Batiste would have at least 109 speed, but then the rest of the base stats are going to be dropped 6%. Just keep that in mind again. S1, it's a 20 soul burn based on the icon, but again, no info on what the soul burn does. It would be interesting though to find that out, because I think knowing what their soul burns do will definitely increase the value of them. This one has 20%. Okay, so for example, like Eaton here, 20 soul burn, as you can see the two soul flame icons there. This most likely would be 100%, like either 100% provoke or ignore effect resistance, something like that. Probably going to be ignore effect resistance because it's a 20 soul burn. But we'll see. That's speculation. Hits enemy in the face. When used against an enemy, inflicted with decreased attack, activates Rock Smash, and Rock Smash does an AoE attack. Again, pending the modifiers, that could be very high potential. The S2 is a passive skill, up to 100% chance to decrease the attack of the enemy with the highest combat readiness for 2 turns. Now that's very good to have. If you do run him with, let's say, a stripper, to get rid of any immunity chance, let's say like Basar or Harado or something like that, or even ML Baal, this would be really good because up to 100% chance to decrease the attack, as long as most likely if people are running it like a really fast hero other than Lilius, that most likely is a lowish effect resistance hero, so you have a high chance of actually getting this the attack down. But the thing is, like, yeah, it wouldn't work on Assassin Kali because Assassin Kali most likely would outspeed you, and then she won't be the highest combat readiness, so you can't you can't attack down Assassin Kali. I'm just thinking of like ways to use him off the top of my head as I'm doing this recording. And then S3 attacks enemies blindly fast. I love the descriptions. When used against enemy with decreased attack, decrease the defense for 2 turns. So I think for him, I mean, he can be built as a damage dealer because his base stats are there for it, but he does need some effectiveness as well. On Taurus star signs, there are no effectiveness at all. So So yeah, you'll have to fish for it a bit. I think most of his skills does require a bit of effectiveness. But most of the time, if you're trying to attack down or defense break, you're most likely doing it on someone with low effect resistance anyway. So you might not have to fish for really high stats. So anyways, that's my thoughts on it. I think out of the 5 here, I think Lena and Eaton are probably the 2 I'm most interested in. Although Batiste, I think it's really cool. I'm not 100% sure I would use him. But anyways, I'm always talking about it from a PvP perspective, I think. Holo Trials official opening, so preseason's over. Archdemon Mercedes leads the way. Some changes now. If you clear it, you get some bonus. Even though on the it's additional 2 Wisdom Gaze. You know, I mean, it's not gonna make the biggest difference, but I think people really do want these, especially with all these new exclusive equipments coming. We're gonna talk about that. So I'm gonna scroll down here. Not much to cover. Yeah, shows a preview of the Archdemon Mercedes weaknesses and strengths for this week. So definitely take a look at that. New exclusive equipment, man. We were saying this yesterday. We had that Twitter teaser where Charles was teased and he's getting a new exclusive equipment. People are like, what? Why are they buffing Charles already? Charles right now is one of the most sought after, especially if you have ML Cecilia, SSB. But even if you don't have those 2, Charles is time and time again, I think, proven to be one of the best GVG, specifically GVG heroes. And even in Arena, he's still really good. But I think in GVG, because of the lower amount of members on the team, like Charles really excels because his S3 does more damage with less people on the map. But anyways, we'll talk about this. Blaze Dingo base stats get up to 14% defense increase. That's pretty decent. But Blaze Dingo, if I remember correctly, he's actually pretty squishy for Soul Weaver. So I mean that defense will definitely help, even though he doesn't do any scaling on the defense. I kind of wish that it was like more health or something, but not gonna complain. Punishment for his S1, when a critical hit is made with punishment, dispels 1 debuff inflicted on the caster and the ally with the lowest health. That might be somewhat usable. I think that might be out of these 3, I think this is gonna be the one that people will probably use the most, I think, if you're gonna use Blaze Dingo in a PvP fight. Divine Punishment increases the defense for the caster for 2 turns. Very good for, you know, survivability, but I think if you're gonna run Blaze Dingo, you wouldn't really rely on him. Like, you wouldn't rely on himself for survivability. Either you have a team comp that can really kill off the enemy like really quick, or you have some other way of making him survive, either with a healer or with a tank. So I'm not quite sure how the S2 is going to be used there, but I think the S1 very, very good to have. This one grants the increased attack, greater attack, 2 turns when using Sacred Power for the caster alone. So if you're using him as a cleaver, this could be very good. Greater attack buff, do not underestimate that. That's going to be insanely good. Charles, man, this is my man. All right, up to a 14% attack. Already an increase, like crazy increase. Like if it had health, if it had anything actually on Charles is still so stat hungry that I wouldn't have minded anything on this. But attack is definitely a very good one. Aims directly for his kit. That's gonna be awesome. Slash. So both the top and the middle one are his S1. So we'll call, for the namesake, we'll call S1-1, S1-2. S1-1 activates smash. Activate smash increased by 10% when using slash. So on Charles's description, 25% to activate smash when using slash, and then the effect is doubled when the enemy is buffed. So up to 50%. Now at the moment we're kind of speculating, where does this increased 10% come in? Does it come in at the base before it doubles the effect, or does it come after? I'm assuming it comes after, but if it's before, it's so OP. Because if it's before, it's 35% without a buff, and then you double that, which would be 70%. That's really strong, but if it's not before, if it's calculated 10% after the fact, then it's still 60%. Now, based on my reading of all of them, I think that this one is probably the most important to have on pretty much all the time, because really think about it, you're increasing a 10% chance. Like, you would mola this if you could. You would mola an increase to activate smash. So why not for the exclusive equipment? I don't think the other ones are stronger than this. And of course, everyone knows that once he activates smash, that's really where his damage dealing comes from. So that's very cool. Slash, because it has a 1x mod, instead of like instead of smash having a higher mod, and mod difference is based on how much buffs he has stacked. If you decide to use this one, it does have a 15% additional attack down debuff. So at the moment, if you max Mola, his effect chance on his S1 is 60%, so 75%. That's pretty good. That's Violet territory, very strong. But it's like, are you going to use it? If you are using Charles on a defense, what people do like running is going to be some kind of immunity or cleanser. At least the cleanser. The immunity does of course set off Charles to like eat away at it, because you increase his smash activation chance, but this also increases the damage by 10%. So if it's based like Yufine has like a 1x mod on her S1, 30% chance for her S1-2, 30% increased damage. It makes her damage mod about a 1.3. So this being a 1.1, like, is it gonna make a really big difference? I think so, but if you compare to the S1-1 here, I think the S1-1 to me makes me more excited. Although yes, if you run on a counter set, if you have Elbrus Ritual Sword, you'll do that additional 10% damage. But if you don't have Charles max molded on the S1, having this extra damage versus this, most likely you have Smash max molded, so +5. I think having this activate is more worth it, but that's my opinion. Faithful Strike dispels all debuffs inflicted on the caster after using Faithful Strike. Keep in mind that this is an after, so if let's say you don't have him on immunity and someone runs Dizzy, let's just say, okay, this is just hypothetical, someone runs Dizzy on you and does all 3 debuffs on your Charles, you do Faithful Strike, you dispel the debuffs after the fact, yes, but during the hit of Faithful Strike, you're both blinded and attacked down. So to me, this is not super good. It could be good if you're somehow, let's say you're using Charles on a defense team, it could be good if somehow you're baiting the enemy to debuff the rest of your team. Now, most high-end Charleses will be running immunity anyway, and let's say if you are running I would say the most cancerous team right now would be Charles, ML Cecilia, and SSB. At this recording point, if you are running that team and you have a barrier on ML Cecilia and you have immunity on Charles, it's going to be pretty difficult to strip his buff without opening yourself up to a whole can of worms. So for example, ML Baal will only be able to strip 1. J Kisei, if you dual cleave it, you'll only be able to strip 1. If you use Basar or Harado, yes, you can strip all buffs, but then it activates high chance for Charles to go like Elbrus and then smack you in the face, which could really set back your attacking team. So to me, other than let's say like Basar's unbuffable debuff, this one won't be as good. Like you can dispel that at the end, but again, it grants it after the fact. So even if Basar does get the unbuffable on you, you can't dispel that in time for your own buffs, right? So you can't get attack buff and a shield buff or a defense buff on himself before that happens. So to me, again, I think the S1-1 is the winner here. But again, that's how I would use Charles. But yeah, anyways. And then the last one would be Tywin. Dispel one more buff when using a Sword Storm. That's kind of nice to have. So up to a 75% chance if you Mola to dispel one buff, but you get an additional one. I suppose it's only if the dispel procs. So it's not an additional proc. It has to have the initial dispel to proc before this one does, but this will always be guaranteed. So if you get the 75% chance to dispel, it will always dispel 2. So that's kind of good. Decrease the cooldown of his S3 by 1 turn if a if a buff is dispelled by the S1 again. So also pretty good. In my opinion, I think I would probably run the S1-2 or the S2 here. Commanding Shout. Commanding Shout does it has up to a 3-turn cooldown if you mola it. 30% chance CR boost for the caster and the target that you choose. This gives it a 20%. So really you're getting a 50% CR boost. Taiwan's should be pretty fast. So 2.5 turn before you can get this back. I think this is very usable. I think this one as well. And I don't necessarily like the S1-1, but again, it's personal preference. So really, I see this as a 2.5 turn cooldown for his S2 to get it back. So that's pretty good. Most likely, if you are somehow you can sustain the battle, most likely your damage dealer that is gaining the benefits from the crit rate and attack buff, you'll most likely be able to lap them so that they'll always have this up, always have the buff up, the crit rate and the attack buff up. So that's pretty awesome. Says drop rate up. Ah, man, this is... I'm going to do a very, very light talk about it, just really quick, and then I'm going to go to the Cirilla. Actually, no, I'll do Cirilla first. I think this is pretty quick. Cirilla's buff definitely makes her usable, but for at this point, up to 100% 2 burns for 2 turns, or up to a 50% chance of defense break on the S1. So definitely a very big improvement on Cirilla's usability. I think people will use her, but if you do have... I think 5-star equivalents that can do similar roles, you might not build her up, but it's definitely more usable. I have to say that right now. I think her exclusive equipment has been teased, but it's coming next week for the side story here. But I'm going to talk about Says, and I'm going to end off this RBTL here. So Says is on the drop rate banner. I think there was a funny comment, and I'm gonna show it here. So this one is pretty funny. I'm just gonna note this. Yeah, he's come. Finally, I can save up my bookmark. So obviously that's a somewhat of a tease, like, you know, teasing the fact that Says is not so good right now. Now, if you don't have Says, I don't think at this point he's worth pulling for. Now, just don't blame me if somehow they start buffing Says on like the next batch or something. At this point, I don't foresee a buff because he's still pretty decent without a buff. It's just that the way his kit works definitely does not lend himself well to especially like boss fights, like high HP heroes. You'd have to do a lot of setup for him to be very good. I think in arena some people still use him as a cleaver, but I think popular cleavers right now he's kind of out of the meta. In terms of farmer, he's still really good as an ice farmer. He's still very solid. So for catalyst farming and stuff like that, he'll still do a lot of work for you, especially if you're going for against like fire heroes and let's say your earth village can't really benefit there. The S1 has a 1x mod. The S3 has a 1.8 times mod. Soul burn is a 3.2. It's 20 soul burn. And this is why a lot of people used him before, especially with Wind Rider. But if you're a new player, you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to get into it because it's no longer applicable at this point. So 3.2 times mod is one of the highest in the game. I think CDOM has like the second highest, which is soul burn, 20 soul burn on the S1, which is a 3 times mod. He has a 3.2 times mod, which is way stronger. If you kill the enemy, it does an AoE splash attack. The explosion does 150% of the hero's self attack. So it's very high. And yeah, the S1, like I said, has a 1x mod. It does grant unhealable. I do like this aspect of on him. 50% chance, but if you awaken it, it's 100% chance. Regardless, you will always get it. So it's very usable in that aspect, but you just have to have high enough effectiveness to roll against their effect resistance. And then the S2 has a 0.5 percent rate. If the enemy is lower than 50%, when you use the S1, you will use the S2. You'll use Encroach, and it can only be activated once per turn. I don't think at this point it activates with Dust Devil, because it activates once per turn, and I don't think it activates with dual attacks, if I remember correctly. But I might have forgotten. I haven't used Sez in a really long time. So anyways, in summary though, if you're new, I don't think you should pull for him. If you're for collection purposes, I guess so. But in my opinion, I would just save it. I think this one is definitely a more skippable filler banner, or return banner rather, compared to last week for Earth Vildred. Anyways, I'm going to end this here. So if you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys on the next Reading Between the Lines.